of the great happiness and excitement that was experienced at the news of the rising of Jesus. All that we promised came true in and through his resurrection. Help us carry the joy of this Easter season each and every day of the year. Alleluia, alleluia. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I'd like to also call Trustee Daryl D'Souza to do the land acknowledgement.
Land is all around us, physically and metaphorically. Is what has been given and will be here at the end. Includes or gives people a constant reminder, work to do better. This reminder is not passive, it's a daily call to action. Must always do more, little more every day, make the land, make everything better, more hospitable and equitable, mindfully. As always, we thank the Mississauga, credit, local treaty partners who have been stewards of this land for generations. Together we commit beauty and peace to fight injustice vigorously, absolutely, create a future with hope.
Thank you very much. If we can sit down, please. One thing I forgot to mention is that we have regrets from Trustee Sean Xavier and Trustee Bria Corbett for this evening, and Trustee Thomas this evening. A4, can I have approval of the agenda, please? Who would like to approve? Trustee Nisha Thomas, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? Seeing none. A6, approval of the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee minutes, February 20th, 2024. May somebody move those, please? Trustee Daryl D'Souza, thank you. Any opposed? Sorry, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, thank you. There are no awards and presentations this evening, no delegations. We go to D1, regular reports, the Ontario Catholic School Trustees Association report.
No report tonight, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Trustee Rosario. On to D1B, good news items. Are there any good news items? Seeing none. Nothing in E, nothing in F. G1, Madam Director, to you.
Through the chair, and good evening. Policy 105, accidents and illnesses, will be presented by Superintendent Oda. Superintendent Oda is online this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Through the chair, and I do send my regrets for not being there in person, I'm pleased to present policy 1.05, accidents and illnesses, and the associated gap 101.02, which, if approved, will be renamed student accidents, injuries, and illnesses. And this information begins on page 13 of your agenda package. This policy and procedure detail the procedures related to managing accidents, injuries, and serious illnesses among students and staff when they occur at DPCDSB schools, facilities, or DPCDSB sponsored events. As part of our regular review cycle, staff reviewed and made minor revisions to policy 1.05 and the associated gap. These revisions were intended to differentiate clearly between local management of accidents, injuries, or serious illnesses occurring on school premises, at our facilities, or on school-sponsored events that involve students and those that involve staff. Policy 1.05 was updated to refer principals to the gap 101.02 in instances of accident, injury, or illnesses for students, and also to gap 310.00 workplace injuries and the health and safety manual for accidents, injuries, or illnesses among staff. Additionally, staff updated gap 101.02 for a couple of purposes. Number one, to articulate clearly the procedures to be followed in the case of a student accident, injury, or serious illness on school property or a school sanctioned event, and also to clarify requirements for principals to develop a communication procedure in the event of such incidents. Thirdly, it was to clarify the step-by-step response for accidents, injuries, or illnesses of a serious nature, and to accidents and injuries deemed not of a serious nature. So we're hopeful that this changes to the GAP will provide some clarity to principals around those communication procedures that will then be shared with our families within our school environments. Those are the updates that were made to those GAP and policies, and I'm happy to take any questions that trustees may have.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Odo, for your report. Are there any questions? Trustee Bruno-Nika?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This just deals with the actual illness and injury, correct? Does not deal with the supervision. It just deals with the act of being.
Yeah. Yes, through the chair, Trustee Ianika, this policy and GAP deals with specifically what we do in the instance where a student is injured at school and what our response is from, say, a first aid standpoint and how we contact parents, and if it's a serious accident or injury, contacting emergency services, for example.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman, to staff, we already dealt with that other issue of ratio, correct?
Through the
And we
chair, yes.
updated- and
We dealt,
updated it.
we dealt with that at the February
Yes.
bylaw meeting.
I just wanted to, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? So we have a recommendation here that the Board and Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees the policy 1.05 accidents and illness be approved and adopted as amended. Trustee Luisa Rosario will move that. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Thank you very much.
Through the chair, G2 is the revised policy 210, approval and use of student learning materials. This revised policy is being presented by Superintendent Murphy, and it's on page 24 of your e-agenda.
Good evening, and through the chair, policy 2.10, the approval and use of student learning materials, went into effect in November of 2010. The policy speaks of learning resources used by our students. It articulates clearly that resources that are used must support the learning expectations of the Ontario curriculum by embodying our Catholic beliefs, be age and grade appropriate, and adhere to the principles of equity and inclusion. In addition, GAP documents 408, selection guidelines for school resource materials, GAP 408.01, learning resources for secondary school classrooms, and GAP 408.02, learning resources for elementary school classrooms, have been updated to reflect the edits on policy 2.10. All documents now use the term learning resources instead of learning materials. All documents have been extensively reviewed by the Religion Department staff and program, subject experts in program, special ed, and equity and inclusion. Given GAP 408.01 and GAP 40802 were essentially the same documents, albeit phrased as an elementary and secondary version, the recommendation is to rescind 408.02 as all information is now included in 408.01. This concludes the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the edits.
Thank you very much. I'll start a list, but before I start a list, can I just ask for clarification? There is blue, red, and green. Is there any differences for anything?
Through the chair, I can respond to that question. The difference in color has to do with the timing of the revision. So some revisions happen when one reviewer looks at them, and then different colors are brought on as additional reviewers or periods of time come forward.
Thank you. Just want to make sure there's nothing special about it. So, Trustee Daryl D'Souza, Trustee Bruno-Nika, are there anybody else have questions? See none? Trustee Daryl D'Souza, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you. My question is there anything in this policy which states as to the oversight on material that's being shared by teachers in the classroom? Who monitors that the material shared by the teachers as per this policy? Because I've received complained recently and a few in the past, wherein material shared in the classroom by the teacher wasn't age appropriate and was an issue. To you, Mr. Chairman.
So through the chair, any materials that we purchase for the system are extensively reviewed and then shared in the schools with in-servicing and supports available for teachers and administration. Those are primary resources. Resources that are secondary, a nature where a teacher may bring in a resource, relies on the teacher's professional choice in terms of the appropriateness of that material. If it is a larger resource, and I'm talking about a resource such as a newspaper article or something that's current or something that they have may seen that they want to bring in for an art lesson. If it's of a resource of a more permanent nature, then there is a process that they must go through, which is to refer the material to the principal, who will then make decision whether or not that material has to be referred to program department for extensive review. But at the end of the day, for secondary materials, or I don't want to use the word casual, but for those kind of materials, teachers have a professional responsibility to ensure that what they're bringing into this classroom is age appropriate, supports our Catholic values, and is part of what the curriculum expectations are.
What about for elementary schools?
I can respond to that. It's the same response. I think perhaps maybe the use of the term secondary may have given you the impression that we were talking about secondary schools. What Superintendent Murphy was referring to is supplementary material. So while there are core resources that we vet and we provide for the system, we also know that teachers will rely on supplementary materials, and as referenced by Superintendent Murphy, regardless of whether it's secondary or element, they have a professional responsibility to make sure that the resources that they've been brought in, they've previewed them themselves to ensure that they're developmentally appropriate, aligned with our Catholic values and aligned with the curriculum. Ultimately, at the end of the day as well, the principal of that school has a responsibility to ensure that the staff are using the resources in that way. When we have our webcast to fulsomely go over all of these changes to policy, we will be making that abundantly clear and reminding people of that. And it'll also be part of annual reminders through the program department to all of our educators of their professional responsibility around resources.
I mean, professional judgment is one aspect, and we call it supplementary resources. Now, what might be fine for the teacher might not be fine for the community or even for the board. How are we going to manage that aspect? Because those are the ones which actually come up, and most of the time it's supplementary material that is used by teachers. Is there a possibility that we have an oversight? Probably the principal reiterates that, sends an email, speaks to their teachers at every class, at every teachers meeting, because that's important and necessary. Otherwise, we do have challenges. And
Through the chair, we have introduced, I want to say in the last year or so, items that we consider to be mandatory that need to be addressed at staff meetings when the principals have their staff meetings, and they involve a variety of topics that we believe warrant some reminders. So this particular one we can certainly include. In addition to that, we do have a process for a request for if educators want to use supplementary materials, and what I would consider might have some sensitive topics associated with it. There is a process that identifies that they need to bring that to the attention of the Program and Learning Services Department so that it gets reviewed, and that we're also able to provide some guidelines and guidance around it if we think that it has merit for being used as a supplementary resource. But we can certainly highlight that with the principals and ensure that there's a reminder around.
thank you, Madam Director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Trustee Bruno Nika, go ahead, please.
Mr. Chairman, just on Trustee D'Souza's question, follow-up, what's the turnaround time for the seat, ruling, and reply to what you just said.
Oh, well, I can only speak to the time when I was up in program. We had indicated that if there was a process that had indicated that if you have additional material that you want to use in your classroom and a sensitive topic or controversial topics in it, we bring it to the attention of the department. But those reviews, for the most part, would take place in the summertime. And you were not allowed to use it until it went through that fulsome review, because it takes a significant amount of time to be able to look at those resources. But that's for a certain category of material. I would expect that, and maybe Superintendent Murphy can talk about this. If a principal was unsure about a resource that a teacher wanted to use in a classroom and that was brought to the department's attention, I would not suspect that the turnaround time would be that long. And maybe Superintendent Murphy can talk to that.
So through the chair, it depends on the complexity of the material and the question in action. For example, we may have a call from a principal regarding something that one of the consultants or the principal or myself are familiar with. That turnaround may be as quick as a phone call. If it's something that we're not familiar with or there are other ramifications, it may take us a couple of weeks because we have to ensure that we have the curriculum experts. And on top of that, equally or more important, is that we have a theological perspective that it's supporting whatever is supposed to be happening in our classroom. So it really depends on what the material is, how long it's been, and how many departments we have to consult and how many experts we have to bring in. But we work really quickly to get people answers because we don't want them to feel that they're being disregarded. And in the case where there is sound professional judgment, but the educator is being diligent and wanting to make sure, and the principal wants to make sure, and we try to address that as quickly as possible. So it really depends.
Subsequent, Mr. Chairman. As the director and superintendent knows, a couple of months ago, maybe less, I had an issue with respect to items that were being solicited by a vendor of ours. Can I assume that this is only for classroom and not library? Or does this rule fall into the library as well?
Through the chair, this covers all the resources that are brought into our school. And in respect to that issue that you have, you recall that we put direction out to the system that honors the partnership that we have with parents and the primacy of ensuring that our parents have a choice around whether or not they want flyers sent home to purchase books from a third-party vendor. And so we'll continue with that process and continue with annual reminders around that.
Could I request staff email just this report to trustees? Because I would like to share it with my community, the schools of this board that I represent. Say, you know, some parents have raised other issues, but having this policy reassures me when I reassure them, and they become now reassured. Many reassured, but it gives them an idea that we are and have a policy that clearly states what needs to be done and how it needs.
To the chair, we can ensure that trustees have that as a standalone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, is there, can't find it, which page it would be on for our recommendations?
Through the chair, page 25 is the motion.
Sorry, I was looking at the end of the report. Thank you. The recommendation is that the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees Policy 2.10 approval and use of student learning materials be approved and adopted as amended. I may have a mover, please. Trustee Paula D'Amato Giovinazzi, sorry, apologies. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. On to G3.
G3 is the rescission of policy 4.90, pregnant students in Dufferin Peel School. Superintendent Murphy will present this report, which is on page 127.
Policy 4.90, pregnant students in Dufferin Peel schools, was created in 1998, revised in 1992 and 2012, and is being recommended this year for rescission. Our board ensures our pregnant students receive appropriate support to continue their education and dignity and have access to the resources they may need. GAP 3.12.07, freedom of information and protection of privacy for students' pregnancy and confidentiality, is also recommended for rescission as staff are working on revising and amalgamating existing gaps within the requirements of the freedom of information and privacy gaps. That does conclude the report on this particular policy, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Recommendations that the Board and Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees. The policy 4.90, pregnant students in Dufferin Peel schools, be rescinded. I have a mover, please. Trustee Herman Valoria. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried.
G4 is the revised policy 10.00, homework from kindergarten to grade 12, including students with modified curriculum expectations and alternative curriculum expectations. Superintendent Murphy will present this revised policy found on page 131.
Policy 10.0, homework is defined by the Ministry of Education's 2010 document on assessment, evaluation, and reporting in Ontario schools, growing success, as work that students do at home to practice skills, consolidate their knowledge and skills, and/or prepare for the next class. Our policy prioritizes our supporting our students in learning to balance their personal and their school lives. GAP 4.415.00, homework kindergarten to grade 12, was also reviewed in conjunction to this policy. There were minor updates in the wording, the roles and expectations, and an insertion for the consideration of the weekend when homework is being assigned. Includes the report, and I'm happy to take any questions regarding this.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Trustee Bruno Nika, go ahead, please.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question, but a request. If this also could be forwarded to trustees. I know that I don't think any trustee, I don't think I'm special in that I'm the only one that gets questions of this nature. So if trustees had it, we could talk about it at council as well. So if staff could, I would appreciate it.
Through the chair, we will.
Are there any questions? Seeing none. I'd like to actually pass the chair over to Trustee Anisha Thomas.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is, couldn't see it on here, but is there a requirement as to how much time in advance students should be notified about tests or any other type of homework projects to be due?
We have not put guidelines along that particular direction because it's very dependent on what the course is, what the grade level is. What we have been very clear about is the amount of homework. And what we've also tried to emphasize is when we're looking at homework as part of that studying and prepping for class, that falls within the guidelines of what students are required to complete.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A follow-up question, if you don't mind. When it comes to, I guess also wording again, I couldn't find it in here and just reading a couple of times here. When a test is postponed due to whatever reason, either the teacher's not there or the teacher's there, but for whatever reason, they just couldn't get to it. What is the protocol put in place? Because let's face it, students, yes, they get homework as required. Sometimes they have a test on a Tuesday. Kids have to study over the weekend. And then on Monday, they figure out, oh yeah, we're not having our test until next week. So is there any way that we can put some wording in here that says, you gotta give fair warning? At least the parents or the kids, because if a kid has to study all weekend for a test and not have it on Monday, it's a problem.
Through the chair, program department is continually reminding our teachers of the importance of the pedagogy of kindness. And if we are teaching our students about balancing their personal and their school lives, that we are expecting the same considerations to come from them. The challenge we have is there's some complexities in terms of moving those tests around. And I cite the example of a good teacher working with students who may operate on the principle of recognizing that that test on Tuesday isn't going to work for those students and will maybe make a deal to have that test at another time. If we are very prescriptive, those good teachers that are already sensitive to the needs of those students may find that the policy may restrict what they know is good pedagogy for those students. So what I can say as superintendent of program is that we are continually reminding with a lot of enthusiasm our staff the importance of ensuring that students have adequate warning and that changes are provided in a way that students can cope with them. If there's a request to put it in the policy, we can consider that, but it is a complex request because I do believe that many of our teachers do a very good job of reading the room, especially after long weekends or when something has happened that has really made it difficult for students to fulfill their commitments.
Thank you very much.
Through the chair, we could put a statement in under Article 3. And we can do that, like we could just make a general statement. It talks about the characteristics of effective homework. So we could make a general statement around how students are advised well in advance of deadlines.
That's good. And
Assist.
if there's any way that we can, sorry, Madam Director, didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's fine.
If there's also a way to put something in there that parents could also be, depending obviously on grade. I don't want, grade 12 student to have, their parents know how much homework they have. Because we all know there's a lot more homework than a grade 1.
Mhm.
But a parent to a certain age would be able, or grade level, be able to understand that, yes, this child has something and that they're not doing it on Monday night because they forgot to bring it home on a Friday.
Right, so we can say parents, guardians, students are advised well in advance of timelines associated with due dates of assignments and homework.
That sounds very good. And the reason why I'm also asking this is because we don't want to teach our kids that deadlines can just be moved at willy-nilly. I understand there's issues potentially with the class not being ready for it, whatever it is. But when they get into the real world and they expect to have a deadline moved, well, it happened in school. Why didn't it happen here? So it's just a learning thing. But thank you very much for that.
Can I just check with the recording secretary that you got that language?
Thank you, Madam Director. I'm done, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, the following recommendation is provided for consideration that the Board Bylaw Policies Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that Policy 10.00, homework kindergarten to grade 12, including students with modified curriculum expectations, be approved and adopted as amended. Moved by Trustee Stefano Pascucci. All in favor? Everyone opposed? Anyone opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Through the chair,
Yes. Go ahead, please.
G5 is policy 8.04, partnerships and business arrangements. Executive Superintendent Chirapaka will present this policy, which begins on 158.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Policy 8.04, partnerships and business arrangements, is one of the older policies to come forward for review. It was effective September 2003 and has not been reviewed until now. As part of activities in our schools, we know that different types of partnerships exist. The larger, more involved partnerships are identified by planning and operations and fall under community planning and partnerships policy and GAP. Under this policy, we recognize partnerships and sponsorships that take place in schools. The revisions include adding definitions, an approval process, and amending the length of any of those arrangements. As well, a change in the title is recommended to rename the policy Partnerships and Sponsorships. In preparing for this presentation, we worked with the research department to issue a survey to schools to determine if any sponsorships exist and to identify them if they did. Results of the survey showed that we had 131 of our 151 schools respond. 7 of the 131 indicated that they did have some type of sponsorship. Those examples included community businesses that provide sponsorship to schools and in return get advertisement in their yearbooks. Local community stores providing prizes for fundraising events. Advertisement for those would be either on the silent auction table or in a flyer distributed for the event. And another example was grocery stores providing funds for the breakfast program. And they would get recognition in a newsletter. At this time, we recognize that sponsorships are small and not really significant across all schools. However, should they grow, we have the policy in place to guide schools and the process. Thanks. I can take questions if you like.
Thank you very much. Trustee Dion D'Souza on the list. Anybody else? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we are saying at this point in time, sponsorships are small, and should they grow, we will create policy.
So through the chair, this is the policy that would guide it. So we have the policy in place. I'm just recognizing that right now we don't really have a lot of sponsorships, but if we do have this process that we can follow for approval and monitoring and making sure they're only 1 year in length, and then we can approve again if we need to.
Is there a dollar value in terms of the sponsorship question?
Through the chair, in the education sector,
No, not.
There's not a
education,
lot,
it's for our
no.
schools. Because if you're saying if it grows, growth means what? Like, is it
You're right.
$1,000, $5,000, $50,000? What is growth?
I guess through the chair, it could mean additional funds to do something in the school. It could be adding to their learning environments and their learning activities. It just depends on the type of sponsor or community provider who wants to come forward and provide that sponsorship. Sponsorship, in turn, they get advertising for it, so.
I understand that. I'm
Right.
just saying in our policy, are we specifying a dollar value? If sponsorship is more than $10,000, then it needs to come for approval. Or can the principal say, you know what, I'm fine. I feel 50,000 is small because the budget of the board is $1 billion, so it's nothing.
Right, through the chair, you're right, we don't have those limits built in. Probably something we should have added at the time. Right now, what we have is an approval required by exec council. So we could put a limitation on what principals can approve, what exec
mean-
should approve, and I don't know if you want something that
Not
trustees would
necessarily what
approve.
principals can approve. I believe we can specify that if the sponsorship value, be it monetary or non-monetary, is more than $5,000, it needs to come to exec.
Okay, that's
Put a dollar
easy to
value
add.
so that we at least have some control, because what's small and big is very relative.
Through the chair, we can take back and put thresholds and where they need to go based on thresholds. And if trustees are comfortable with that, we'll bring it directly to the board meeting in its full capacity for trustees to consider there.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Trustee Luz de Rosario.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the chair, could you tell me where the bingo fundraiser will fall into this one, like the gaming one that comes from the city? And maybe you could give us an update on where it stands and.
So through the chair, anything with regards to that type of fundraiser falls under a different policy. That's our fundraising and donations policy in GAP. So I think we brought that one forward one of the previous meetings, but where we are with the bingos, I don't have that update. Perhaps legal counsel.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. This has been a very slow process. As I reported at an earlier meeting, I've been speaking with the city of Mississauga, with their legal department, and the the lawyer there that supports licensing and enforcement. And they pretty much came back to say that basically the rules are the rules. So I have gone back to them and said, okay, so to change those rules, there's no, I asked to confirm that there's no appetite to change those rules. I'm waiting for confirmation about that. But the next step, and I alluded to this before, is to speak to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, but I want to make sure that I get the absolute no from the city of Mississauga before I go there to see that's what we need to target next.
Go ahead, Madam Director.
Through the chair, I think there needs to be a distinction between raffles, which is what I think that Council Beck is pursuing, is the possibility of raffles. But I believe Trustee Del Rosario's question was around bingo.
Yeah.
And I think we recently had a query about, I think it might have been the Knights of Columbus or an organization that was approaching schools saying, if you're willing to send us volunteers to run the bingo offsite at night, then you'll get a portion of those proceeds. And there's no issue with that.
So, through the chair, I think the issue that we had some councils, school councils that were thinking of signing up. I remember one of my schools, they wanted to sign up, but they also, because sometimes depending on the sessions you have, you'll get about $4,000, $5,000 a month. So that may be too much for one school. So if they share it with one or two schools, then it's a good sharing of volunteering, because all they have to do is volunteer for 2 hours, and they may get 3 or 4 sessions. So if they have enough people, they get 4 sessions, they may get $8,000 a month is what they're looking at, that they can split. And what you need to do really is to apply to the gaming of the city and say you'd like to be a part of this bingo. And then you could open it up to our schools and say, whoever wants to do this, these are your criteria. And basically that's as simple as that. It's just like, I don't know, based on our policies and procedures, where we're gonna have a problem. I don't think there's really an issue of problem.
Through the chair, with the bingo, there is no problem. But what I'll have Council Beck do is follow up with you in the city, because if there's an opportunity to advertise to our schools, here's an opportunity for fundraising. It's certainly adults volunteering on their own time to go and run it, and they get the proceeds. That's not an issue. This is a totally separate issue from raffles, right? So
It is
we can
different.
follow up on that, and if there's prospect of a source of funding for our schools, if they're willing to volunteer their time, then we'll ensure that that's shared broadly.
I could share with you, I will find out the name in the city that you could apply for.
Great,
'Cause
thank
I know
you.
the Rama Gaming is opening up some of their sessions that they could divide it among. So we could say different field schools, and then we allocate it.
Okay.
I'll let you know, Mark. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Brunica.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to ask about the raffle, but I will ask during questions asked of, because I don't believe that this runs into that. But I'll also defer the question of the bingo, because I think that we need, I would like, and I'm sure 10 other trustees and our student trustees would like to educate our parents on the opportunities such as what Trustee Del Rosario is talking about. But in order for us to relay that information, and I personally, I'd like to do it to my communities personally. And if I have share a school, then it would go under 2 to say, hey, you have this opportunity. This is what you need to do. Should they choose to, they have a step-by-step. they choose not to, so be it. There's an X at the very top of the email. You push it and all of a sudden that email is gone, which I say to parents all the time. I look forward to that information. So, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Seeing none?
Through the chair, there's no action on this because we're going to take it back and rework it a bit and bring it to the board meeting.
Okay, thank you. G6, policy 8.06.
Yes, policy 8.06 is the flag protocol. Executive Superintendent Vecchierino is going to present this starting on page 166.
Good evening again, everyone. As trustees are well aware, policy 806, flag protocol, is one of Dufferin Peel's policies which governs the flying of flags at its schools and its other facilities. At the request of a trustee, updates have been made to this policy, and the report summarizes those changes. If you look at the amended version of the policy, sections 2.5, 2.6, and 2.7 in the revised policy, that might be the clearest way for everyone to follow, highlight the areas where changes have been made to the policy as it stands at the moment. Pending review by trustees, we would be pleased to take any questions with regards to 8.06 flag protocol.
Thank you very much. Are there any trustees that have questions? Right, Trustee Herman Valoria, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through the chair, the question regarding 2.5. Additional flags may be displayed inside, etc. It's in support of particular observances and so on. At the end, it says that they may be removed when not being observed. I would suggest that it should not be may, but shall do it.
So that's a suggested amendment. If the trustees want to consider that amendment, we would deal with that before going to approving the full policy. So do we want, so the way in which you deal with that procedurally is trustee Valoria has suggested or asked for an amendment to 2.5, the word may to be changed to shall through the chair. You'd need a mover for that, and then you can have a discussion about it. This is a secondary motion.
Kind of just clarity here.
Talking.
It's not even my bone. There it is. That seemed better. There's no motion yet, so we can't amend a motion that doesn't exist. So in other words, that's it. So there is no motion made, and you have this.
Right.
Which is fine, but adjustment is perfectly okay, just that we don't have motion related to because we don't have a motion.
Right. I guess I'm trying to navigate that there's suggestions to the existing, you're right, the motion hasn't actually been put on the floor yet. And so perhaps maybe the motion should be put on the floor in order for the amendments to be made.
Okay, I have another point to make. In the old, the unrevised version of this protocol, director approves any additional flag. That is now missing. So who approves the additional flag?
Through the chair, I don't believe the director should be the sole approver of flags. I believe that that if trustees want to ensure that the wording puts parameters around the display of flags, that's enough. It's also guided by, just like our learning resources, the expectation that anything that's coming into our school is appropriate for that observance.
Okay, I would also suggest then that any additional flags should be approved by the trustee.
Trustee Valora?
Um, since the approval now, the director is no longer approving the additional flags because that was contained in the old, the unrevised version. This, this policy. I would then, instead of the director approving the additional flags, I'm suggesting that the trustees approve additional flags.
I have a question on that, but
That would be an operational issue that we don't get involved in. That would be operational. Is that correct, Madam Director?
Well, through the chair, what I was trying to liken it to is we don't ask trustees to approve the resources that are happening in our schools. If you're going to go down the path of approving flags, there would be a whole litany of them. Many of our schools display flags that represent the diverse culture of schools in their board. Are trustees, I mean, it's your policy. If trustees are saying now you want every flag that's going to be displayed in our schools to come before the Board of Trustees for them to approve it,
Well,
that
then-
would be the implication. As
Good.
opposed to what this policy is trying to do is put parameters around and say, first and foremost, the national flag of Canada is the flag that flies, and there's a protocol associated with it. There's other flags, whether they're municipal or whether there's provincial. There's a Share Life flag. We also have the Vatican flag as well. So we're very clear about saying that's what takes prominence in our schools. We recognize that there are a variety of observance days throughout the year, and there are symbols associated with that. And you would just as there's professional judgment around the resources that are being used in our schools, again, we don't come to the trustees and ask for trustees to approve every single resource. But if the implication of trustees are now going to approve every kind of flag or every kind of symbol associated with an observance day, that's the implication of that suggestion. I'm just raising it as what that implication would be.
Okay, since it's now going to be left open to anyone to fly any flag they want to bring into the school, is that the implication?
No, I guess what I'm trying to say that if there was a flag that would be deemed to be inappropriate, for lack of a better example, maybe it's a flag that has some kind of hate slogan on it. I mean, we have other policies and processes that cover that, that would suggest that that would never be allowed.
Okay, and who would be in charge of doing, what's the process in that?
Well, we have a variety of processes, including like it may come up, it goes through our Equity and Inclusive Education Department, or it may come, whether it's observance days, ultimately at the end of the day, yes, senior staff would weigh in on that, or if the director had to say, no, that's not appropriate. I mean, it's your policy. The policy belongs to the trustees.
Well, in my opinion, it leaves the door wide open.
Okay. Trustee Bruno Anika, and then Trustee Daryl D'Souza at this point.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Respectfully, I would disagree with my colleague. We can't get 3 people to sit on a suspension or expulsion. We're going to get 11 or 6 trustees to sit on a flag. I don't support it. I think that common sense and knowledge of our system would kind of say what is acceptable or what it isn't. But my question more so is, I like the idea of changing the word, Trustee Valorio, from may to shall. My question is, why did staff choose that word? Just a general question.
Through the chair, just for clarity, the wording here reflects what the trustee asked for staff to support in bringing an
Okay.
amendment forward.
Okay, okay, so I would agree with changing it, shall. But the concern that I have, let me play out my question if I could. So let's just say for the sake of an argument, it's a National Italian Month. And that month happens to be February. So February 1st, the national flag approved by the board is put up. We have our curriculum that matches that. That on the 28th or 29th, the flag comes down and we move on to the next, and in between, in February, if there is another, another flag that is because of that day, Valentine's Day flag gets flown on the 14th for the sake of an argument, then that Italian one is displaced. Valentine's one gets put up. On the 15th, Valentine's comes down. Is that what staff is envisioning of happening?
Well, through the chair, again, to be clear, this is the trustees' policy,
yes,
right?
but-
I think it's better to talk about the display of flags in our buildings because the only flag that is going up and down a pole is the Canadian flag, right? So to your point and to your example, if February has been identified as Italian Heritage Month for the entire month, then schools can choose to display the Italian flag for all of February, and then it goes down until next February. If it's a day associated with something where there's a symbol or an image or whatever associated with it, then the flag goes up that day. If it's only for the day, maybe it's for a week. It's displayed during that time. And what's being recommended here is that only during the period of which it has been formally acknowledged to be an observance time period.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So it does not have to be a month. It could be Italian week and Monday to Friday. Okay. I just don't want it open-ended so that, because at one point, some may say, well, I want it for another month. No, that's not the deal. Okay, I just want to be clear that. Good, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Daryl D'Souza to this point as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For clarity's sake, again, we have one flag post in every school.
Through the chair, I think we have 3 schools that have more than one flagpole.
Can we remove 2 of them and keep only one? For safety reasons. Because my understanding is the national flag will always fly on that flag post throughout the year at every school, period.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Inside the school, if they want to fly flags behind closed doors, that's at the discretion of the principal.
Through the chair, it's not at the discretion of the
So
principal.
will they come to executives and ask, can we fly this flag?
Through the chair, maybe I can assist with that. Either you go back to putting the director using professionalism and judgment and guided by Human Rights Code, equity and inclusion, will make sound decisions around what we're going to allow to be displayed in our schools or not. If your trustees are comfortable with that, you can put that back in, which takes it away from trustees are now going to be approving every symbol and flag that's in the schools.
I mean, the current policy, where we are saying that additional flags may be displayed at Upton Field Catholic School Board buildings in support of particular observations, means at the discretion of the principal within the school buildings.
It doesn't say at the discretion of the
So
principal.
whose discretion is
So
it?
that's why I was suggesting if, like, this is speaking to trustee Herman Valoria's point as well. How do we know that there's good sound decisions, what's guiding decisions around allowing various observances to happen. The existing policy does talk about the Director of Education may approve that. It's either that or the trustees of the board are going to approve, which means that if this policy goes forward, then staff will bring forward, a list of all the flags, observances, et cetera, for the trustees to approve. You either go that route or you, just as we make the decisions around learning resources, et cetera, ultimately at the end of the day, and as Trustee Stefano Piscucci advised, perhaps maybe it's more a management, a day-to-day management operational
No, it is
decision.
an operational issue. There's
So
no
we'd
doubt
have to
about
put
it.
that line back in there.
Yeah, because it's very clear that 2.5 allows principal to decide what flags he or she wants to fly within the school building, inside the school building. Outside the school building is the national flag. That doesn't change.
Right, but it doesn't explicitly say that the principal is making that decision. So
Yes,
I'm
it
going to suggest this. Additional flags may be displayed inside DPCDSB buildings in support of particular observances as approved by the Director of Education. If you want that,
Yeah,
either as approved
because-
by the Director of Education or the Board of Trustees.
Because it's very clear. Person who's responsible for what happens in that school building is the principal. The highest authority in that school building running that show for 14 hours a day.
Correct, but I don't believe we want this particular decision in the hands of the principal.
So then we need to specify that within 2.5.
Yes.
And yeah, other than that, those 3 schools that have 3 flag posts, again, that should be at the discretion of director, I would hope. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other questions to this point? See, did you want to continue?
I just asked, then are we adding that?
Through the chair, so as trustee Mario Piscucci wisely pointed out, it actually wasn't on the table via motion. There's been some discussion around, amendments that you want. So we're adding 2 things, is my understanding. One is at the end of the first sentence, we're saying as approved by the Director of Education. And then we're also adding, we're changing the word may to shall. So those are the 2 changes that I think I heard this evening.
Actually, since it's already in the old version, we just say it stays the way it is. Without
Just give me a second to look at the existing version. The only reason, trustee Valoria, I added it to 2.5 is that it flows logically in terms of, because 2.5 is a new one that talks about additional flags. And there's
Yeah.
some more parameter around that. So it makes sense to say additional flags may be displayed at the approval of the Director of Education. Makes more sense there.
Thank you, trustee Luzar-Rosario. Then I have trustee Mario Piscucci, and then I have trustee Daryl D'Souza to this point.
Could you just clarify now, the 2.5, we're suggesting that the new one that you said, additional flags may be displayed inside DPCDSB building. What's the next?
In support of particular observances, not at the discretion, at the approval of the Director of Education,
Okay.
as
So-
approved by the Director of Education.
It's approved by. So what about the next line there where such flags are displayed? Can we just cut that out altogether? It says the next sentence is where such flags are displayed, their use shall be limited to the areas of the school or facility allocated to the activities associated. So I think of that they have a flag. So let's say rainbow flag. You put it in the GSA GSA room. Then when GSA is not meeting, that the group is meeting there. I would suggest that we remove those lines. You're already having that discretion. Additional flags may be displayed, approval of. So I don't think it's necessary to put that anymore. It's the purpose. That's the purpose of that.
No, I believe because it clearly states after that, to you, Mr. That it's basically saying that they're going to remove the flag when the observance is over. That's the key aspect, because it has to come down when the observance is over. That's what it says. Last 4 words.
Yeah, but then it could be read, where such flags are displayed, their use shall be limited to the areas of the school or facility. It could be a room. They could have the clubhouse that now being used by the GSA team, and they're gonna put the rainbow flag there on their meeting. So after that, the tennis club is gonna go there and meet. They're gonna put another flag? Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, they'll put a tennis ball there. Right.
So many flags? Necessary? I guess I'm saying, is it necessary? Because I've observed in some of my schools, they have the flag actually around top. One of them was on top, where you could see all the flags. Recognizing inclusivity and equity and all that. So this is in addition, additional flags. Is that what we're looking at? To start just
Oh, so
many
after,
parameters for
after
me.
this policy is approved, you can take the policy, go to that school and say, remove all your flags and only put one at a time.
Through the chair, the other implication of that is, if you have a school that has displayed in their foyer flags of every nation of the schools that represents, this policy would question, what's the observance, and they can't be up there all year long. So we're clear on that.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
What you're saying, sorry, through the chair.
Once this is approved, take it to that school, show them the policies, take it down all the flags and put one at a time.
So that's when it's approved. So I guess what I'm saying is, do we really want to do that through the chair? Because I think we will have some concerns from the schools. Because if they have had that like the flags of whatever students they represent, plus the indigenous flag, the rainbow flag, and Sacred Heart flag, are we going to take them all down and say, okay, this month is only observing Italian flag? So we're going to put only Italian and take down the rest of the flag? I think we'll have more problems than any. That's why I'm saying.
Okay, then we probably say flags bigger than 4 feet.
They're the same sizes. In the schools that I've
so
seen, they're
flag
the same sizes.
Still a flag.
Still a flag.
National flag is not coming.
It's on the flagpole. This is
No, I mean. The
other country.
Okay, so okay. Trustee Mayor Biscucci and the student trustee Bailey Klein after. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sorry.
It's better. The question I have to ask, Mr. Chairman, the foyer tends to be a very busy place. Let's not lose the identity of the Catholic faith at the front of the foyer. We are trying to make sure that everybody knows they step into a Catholic. Mr. Chairman?
Student trustee Bailey Klein, go ahead, please.
Through the chair. this mean that there's like no flags allowed to be flown in like the foyer?
Through the chair, the implications of this, what you could, there's the Canadian flag, there's the provincial flag, the municipal flag, there's the Share Life flag, there's the Vatican flag. And that other flags can be displayed in the school. But if they're associated with a particular observance, whether it's a day, a day associated with, or a month associated and devoted to, or a week associated to that, that they would be displayed during that observance period only.
Chair, it says like that it's only
I think I can help you with that, and that's where I think there may be a little bit of confusion in here is that on the one hand, you're saying where the flags are displayed, it'll be limited to a certain area of the school or a facility where those activities take place. But I think you can broadly interpret that if you're observing, if it's something it's an observance for an entire week, that the school has determined that that embodies the entire building and we're going to display it in the foyer.
they could still.
I think it could be interpreted that way. I think the key point here, though, is that the display of flags other than the ones that are identified in 2.1 through to 2.4 is limited to the period of the observance, whether it's a national observance, an international observance, a provincial observance, a community observance.
Okay, are there anybody else to this point? Okay, so I have trustee Luz de Rosario, Bruno, trustee Unica, to this point? Okay, so trustee Darrell DeSouza, please go ahead for this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2.1 says whenever the national flag of Canada is flown, should not be whenever. The national flag of Canada will be flown forever. 2.1.
Sorry,
Yeah.
What's this question? No, I told you it's another question.
I think we could probably deal with that by shortening that up and just combining the two sentences. So facility including all schools and DPCDSB facilities, and it shall be flown on a flagpole alone. Well, shall. Right. Do you need
Shall.
all the time?
No, basically, it doesn't allow them to pull it down and put something else up. You can bring it half mast, but you can't bring it down.
But I think that this identifies that the flag, it's in the Education Act that schools must fly the Canadian flag daily. But if you want it clarified that, and if you want to clarify that it's all the time, but I thought that was a given. And the fact that it's only a single flagpole, that's all you can put on that flag is the Canadian
No, but
flag.
there are schools, not in this code, that fly another flag on that pole.
That's correct, but that's not what this policy says, and that's not what happens in Dufferin Peel.
Education Act allows that to happen. Two flags, no problem.
Not a
No,
policy.
the Education Act, like to be clear, the Education Act does not say that you do that.
Doesn't discriminate.
And what this policy is saying is that the Board of Trustees have passed a policy that follows the protocol for flying the national flag.
The protocol allows another flag to fly.
Not on the same pole.
That means the protocol is being violated by the schools that fly another flag along with the national.
Protocol. They're not following the
Not allowed.
protocol. This Board of Trustees wants our schools to follow the protocol associated with the Canadian flag.
Okay, so we can change that whenever to always. Assume.
We can do that, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Luz de Rosario.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the chair, about a few years ago, we were able to raise the flag of other countries at the CEC, simply because we have 3 flagpoles. So for the knowledge of my colleagues, I think a few years ago, it was the Italian Heritage Month, the Filipino Heritage Month, and the Portuguese Heritage. We had a request from the different consulates, both from the Portuguese and the Philippine consulate, not sure about Italian. The first one, because it's June 2nd or something, right? Italian Heritage Month is also June. So we were able to raise the flag here at the EC. We had a spare flagpole. That's why we were able to do that. So my question is, are we able to do that?
Through the chair, yes, because you're not violating the protocol for the national flag.
We have the spare. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who has a question? Sorry, okay, so anybody else? No questions? No questions? No questions? Okay, can we get clarification on 2.5, what that would read like?
Through the chair, maybe we can start with we'll start with 2.1 because 2.1 and 2.5 both saw some amendments here.
Best place to
So
start, best place to start at the beginning. Let's go.
So through the chair, I've made notes and I hope that they are correct. The rephrasing of 2.1 would be the national, and I think I might be very loud, I apologize for that. The national flag of Canada shall be flown at each DPCDSB facility, including all schools, at all times, and it shall be flown on a flagpole alone. That's 2.1. 2.5, additional flags may be displayed inside DPCDSB buildings in support of particular observances as approved by the Director of Education or designate. Where such flags are displayed, their use shall be limited to the areas of the school or facility allocated to the activities associated with the corresponding observance and shall be removed when not being observed.
I think we need to provide clarity to the not being observed. I think when it may need to say when the observance day or period ends. Through the chair, I think I had indicated there needs to be clarity to what is meant by when not being observed. So it's been changed to when the observance day or period ends.
Go ahead, Trustee Rosario.
On 2.7, could you just clarify what this means? During liturgical celebrations, only the national flag of Canada shall be flown. So when we're
Through the
talking-
chair, in our schools, oftentimes spaces are used for mass, and it could be large spaces like a cafetorium or a gym. And what this is saying is the only, even if there's an observance period going on at that time, even if it's a whole month or a whole week, the display, if you're going to display any flags in that area where mass or liturgical celebration is going to take place, it can only be the Canadian flag.
Or if it's a, through the chair, so if it's a Sacred Heart, I think which was the month of June. we
That's a
cannot
good
apply
point.
that.
We can adjust that as well to, well, I'm not sure. Is there a flag associated with the Sacred Heart? Right, so there are, so we may need to adjust that to say during liturgical celebrations, only the national flag of Canada or,
And or.
and
it should be
or, and or flags associated with our Catholic faith. Okay,
Madam
Instead of
Director,
and or.
clarify, yeah, and, not and or, just and.
right,
not-
okay, thank you.
Just and. Thank you. Give 'em a-
Any other questions?
Sorry, the only reason I
Sorry.
put or in there is that all schools may not have all of those flags. I mean, certainly we can provide them with the Vatican. That's why I put or, but you're right, it can't replace the national flag. Okay, so we'll leave it at and.
Even word it, Madam Director, I don't know if I can speak, but in addition to the Canadian flag, religious flag would be flown.
What we wanted to make clear is that there would be no other flags other than a national flag of Canada and flags associated with our Catholic faith.
Any trustees have any other questions? Once, twice. Okay, so how do you want to wait?
To the chair, you need a mover now for the motion.
So we're going to move it as amended or with the additional amendments? How is that worded, Madam Director? It says amended?
It's already in the motion where it talks about, you've amended the policy.
Okay. So the following recommendation is provided for consideration. That the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that policy 8.06 flag protocol be approved and adopted as amended. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Paolo D'Amato Giovinazzi. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried.
Through the chair, number 7 is the National Week for Truth and Reconciliation proclamation presented by Executive Superintendent Vecchierino. That proclamation is on 175.
Through the chair, again, page 175, Dufferin Peel has and has always had an ongoing focus on human dignity. It is the foundation of all that we do in support of students, staff, and the broader community. For more than 100 years, residential schools and the system associated with them sought to separate students from their families, and this, I apologize, and this injustice, among others, culminated in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission being struck by the Government of Canada following 6 years of commissioners traveling through Canada and speaking to a large number of survivors. As a result of the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, National Truth and Reconciliation Week was established for the end of September, and each year on September 30th, the observance is celebrated more particularly. In our schools, this observance is often associated with the work of Orange Shirt Day to commemorate the injustices brought about by residential schools. To support this work, it is being recommended based on the motion that you have before you on page 176 that we enshrine this observance through a proclamation which would be read at each of our board meetings at the August board meeting in preparation for the work and observance that would be carried out in the month of September. That proclamation is shown for trustees on page 177. Would be pleased to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Seeing none. Okay. Sure. Okay, so the following recommendation is provided for consideration. That the Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that the proclamation regarding National Week for Truth and Reconciliation be approved. Can I have trustee Nisha Thomas who wants to move this? All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried.
Through the chair, G8 is the procedural bylaw, and this will be presented by Council Beck. It's on page 178.
Thank you. And through the chair, good evening. Before you this evening is the procedural bylaw, and trustees are aware that the bylaw is reviewed at least annually, but it can be brought forward at any time for review. Tonight, staff are asking the committee to recommend to the Board of Trustees that they approve the revised bylaw before you this evening. In addition to a couple of housekeeping cleanup changes, there are two substantive changes. One of them is we simply added what trustees already know about electronic meetings and attendance at meetings as set out in the regulation. So we mirrored the regulation simply for ease of reference so that it's all in one spot in the bylaw, rather than having you to refer to the regulation itself. Also added is a note in delegations. On page 202 of the agenda, it is stated now that a delegation may be made on a topic only once to the Board of Trustees or any committee within a 12-month period, unless the subject matter of the delegation has changed substantially since the prior delegation was made. And those are the substantive changes, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you. Trustee Mario Pascucci on the list. Trustee. Are there anybody else? No. Okay, so trustee Mario Pascucci, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to bring this out. Regarding presentation, can we get back to that point again, please? The way I interpreted from you, what you said, or the interpretation is only once a year, unless it's substantial. Number one, who defines substantial? And number one. Number two, the question is that we're encouraging them, or they're requiring them to give us the document. We have the opportunity for editorial purposes, just the document. So there's an opportunity that we're losing some connectivity there to the community. Am I reading that correctly, or am I looking at it correctly?
Through the chair, you're correct that we do ask for the delegation in writing beforehand, and we vet it to make sure that it complies with all of the requirements. And regarding what does substantial mean, that is going to be at the discretion of the director and the chair. They're going to review that and determine what substantial is. This is to prevent repeat delegations over and over and over again. That's exactly the same thing. If there's a new point to be brought up, absolutely, people are welcome to come back.
So one day. So the idea of having them come here, and I'm thinking of a situation with one of the schools a number of years ago. They kept on coming, and the concern at that time, as the board said, are we preventing other individuals to come forward when we're only listening to 5 on a night, 4 or 5 spots are being taken up by this other organization? We're not bringing anything new to the community or to the presentation. And I agree with that idea that, in fact, there should be a limited number about a topic. I know as a board, we can always expand or extend the period of time that they're allowed to come forward, present their presentation for more than 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. So the concern I have with this of cut them off when the time comes. They're doing their presentation, because they have every right to come to a democratic position, democratic community. We agree that we were here to listen first and foremost. Anyway, so I said my piece. If you want to add, you're fine.
Student trustee Nathan Ewing, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you through the chair. It was very similar to Trustee Pascucci's point. I just want a little bit more clarification on section F of page 202, which we read before. I found this a little confusing. I just want a little bit further clarification. Does this mean that our delegates are only allowed to bring up a topic once a year, or delegates as a whole are only allowed to bring up one topic once a year?
Through the chair, thank you for pointing that out because we may need to change the language so it's more clear. This is about an individual delegate coming forward, saying the same thing over and over.
Okay, thank you very much. Just please adjust the language to please make it more clear. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Through the chair, maybe it should say a delegation may be made on the same topic only once, unless there's a substantive change. Would that help?
So through the chair, would that mean that the delegate will be only allowed to say the topic only once a year? Or,
Only once. Well, yes, only once a year unless something substantially has changed.
okay. Yeah, I just want to make it fully clear so other delegates will be able to come forward and talk about the same topic.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
That again, Nathan? Sorry?
So I was looking to clarify the language in the bylaw to ensure that it says that one delegate is allowed to present a topic once a year, rather than all delegates are allowed to present one topic once a year. So I want to give everybody the same opportunity to speak on a certain topic. That's what I'm trying to say.
So just for my clarification through you, Mr. Chairman, I could speak on a subject only once during the course of a year as a delegate, but can a person that has the same feeling as I do come to the board and speak as well on the same subject?
Yes, they can.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
all I need. Thank you.
Just one, do you have another point or is it to this point?
To that point.
Go ahead, please.
Through the chair, just for further clarification, would that mean another person from the same organization can make the same delegation on the same point?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay,
It's,
thank you.
it's not limiting that. What it's saying is, Nathan, if you're okay with me referring to you as Nathan, Nathan wants to come forward and he wants to delegate on, I don't know, pumpkins on Halloween. Right? And he comes in September and then he asks again, well, maybe he comes in June and then he wants to come again in September and there's nothing substantially different. It's the same concern that's being brought forward by Nathan. But that doesn't stop, well, Nathan might be limited, there may be a decision to say, there's nothing more substantive that you're bringing forward on this topic, so it's not going to be allowed. But that doesn't stop Christopher coming and talking about the same thing, or Bailey coming and talking about pumpkins as well.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Mario Pascucci to this point, and then trustee Luz de Rosario to this point.
Just to this point, through you to the director, currently Robert's Rules of Order allows us trustees to bring something forward. When can it be brought back for reconsideration? It fails the first time for presentation.
Through the chair, you mean if a motion
Yes.
was passed?
Fails. Motion
Fails. Well, interesting. That's very interesting because you're talking about reconsideration. And reconsideration of a motion that fails could really only be brought back later in that meeting. There's no limit that says you can't bring it back in 6 months. You can't, Robert's Rules doesn't define reconsideration that way.
So I've always believed that the 3 months, 6 months or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
I
so
think that was a local decision
Well,
by the Board of
thanks for-
Trustees, but it's not in Robert's Rules of
Thank you for
Order.
clarity. Then. The question is that we can bring it back within the same meeting if we wanted to. Community comes in and wants to do a presentation. They don't have the same opportunity. Back to the Board of Trustees for making that presentation.
Through the chair, can you provide clarity to what you're saying? So
Sure,
a member of the
um,
community does a
The community
delegation?
delegates, it says, I want more flagpoles. We say no.
Right.
We say no. Okay, thank you for the presentation. Second time to come, says, sorry, we can't let you do that because you already talked about it. Trustee could bring it over and bring it back every meeting.
To the chair, they could.
Okay, trustee Luz, to this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just point of clarification. So I use Nathan again. Nate, sorry, such an easy name, lovely name. So Nathan comes and delegate this year, same topic. Because we're talking this year. Does that mean he can come back next year with the same information, nothing changed, and come back? So why are we doing that? I mean, if it's the same content and the content has not changed to more, why would we say, okay, come back next year?
Through the chair, the trustee raises a really good point, and I guess my concern at this point is I'm not so sure that it's being worded in a clear way to give you some comfort and solace that there isn't any kind of attempt to try and thwart anybody who has the right to come forward to the Board of Trustees and delegate. So we could either go at it two ways. One is that you leave it status quo and continue to use the process that is used, which is typically we just ensure that the speech of the delegation is aligned with the process, or whether you want to give direction to staff around whether you do want to limit. But I might want to suggest for this evening that perhaps maybe if you want to consider passing these amendments, that we eliminate F, that we don't deal with that at this time. I think it needs more discussion and more thinking on it so that it's clear to everybody and it serves the intent of what the trustees would like to see around delegations. So maybe we can enter into some consultation with trustees in the meantime, and certainly it can come back. Your procedural bylaw does come back annually, even though from time to time, when there's adjustments that need to be made, we bring it through the year, but it will come back again August or September. In the meantime, we can do some consultation with trustees around delegations.
Trustee Daryl D'Souza, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The same point, point F. We specified 12 months. I mean, is there any logic behind 12? Why didn't we say 11 or 13?
Or why don't we say 5 years? Because we've had that
2 years.
situation as well, right? And that's why I feel that maybe it needs more work.
I believe we need to have something like this.
Mhm.
Because we've had experiences in the past wherein individuals come in and delegate on the same topic without any change in content.
I mean, you could take out the 12 month, you'd make no reference to a period of time. If it's a delegation on the very same topic over and over and over again, and there's no substantive change to what the delegate is bringing forward, do the trustees want the ability to say, I'm sorry, you've come 4 times in the last 3 years on the same topic. There's been no substantive change to the information you're bringing forward. Therefore, we don't believe that it's going to add anything new to the discourse.
And can we possibly say at the discretion of the chair, vice chair, and the director?
If the Board of, this is your policy, right? This is your procedural bylaw. If you're comfortable delegating that authority to the chair, the vice chair, and the director, then that can certainly be articulated as part of this.
That could be one option, or stick to 12 months.
Through the chair, I think the 12-month is also problematic, quite frankly. I do want to advise, I'm going to ask that maybe you give us an opportunity to rework this.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To this point, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just want to say that I think the 12 months is fair. However, I do want to, I just want to point out that, you know, the ratepayers need to have a voice, right? So it's really important that they have a voice. And I think the 12 months is fair. Because, I mean, it's not like they come here without a message. They do have a message, and it's a caring message from, you know, the ones that I think that we're talking about. But it's important for them to have a voice. So I think the 12 months is fair. Thank you.
Anybody else to this point? Seeing none, trustee Darrell Souza, are you done? Thank you, trustee Herman Valoria. Thank you very much. Trustee Mario Pascucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mary Ann, let me play out something here again. They come out here, do their presentation. Thank you very much. And they want to come back a second time. So whether instead of doing that, they come to the trustee. The trustee says, I'd like to bring something forward. Can we put it on the agenda? The trustee approval and put it on the agenda moving forward. So that's still available if we wanted to. And if the trustee loses that particular opportunity, they can come back later on in that same meeting. Okay, thank you.
Student trustee Nathan Nguyen, go ahead, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Just going back to section F, I know it's a decision not going to be made today. I just want to put in any final thoughts. I would recommend for us to strike down section F as a whole. And the reason behind that is because we've had many delegations in the past saying, rather than straight content, it's more of a call to action, right? And so we had a delegation this year where it's a call for action for us to improve on a certain issue. And if we have this policy that's saying for us to decline somebody to have that same call to action, it's restricting their voice, to me at least. So for myself, I would probably just stray away from section F and say that everybody's given the opportunity to make a delegation because they do deserve a voice to speak on whatever issues at hand.
Thank you. Are there anybody else? Go ahead, trustee Rosario.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is the purpose of this is so we do not have the same delegate delegating with the same information. And at the end of the day, we still don't have a response. But if there is, that's the reason why we say, if there is a better content that they're adding to their delegation, then we'd like to hear. We're not saying we don't want to hear anybody. We're just saying you keep coming here 5 times and we kind of receive you and thank you and off you go. So I think it would be better, like if we have that says, okay, the director, myself, we vet on those delegations and we say, okay, you don't have anything more substantial information that you're able to share. So therefore, we think at this point in time, we feel that it's the same information you're going to give us. It's not that we're taking away the voice of anybody. They can come to us all the time. Just find me a different content. Like if it's the same, I could come in here all the time and delegate. And I could say, you know, you have to do this all the time. And you stare at me doing nothing. It's more embarrassing for me to be standing here. I would feel like, okay, I've heard you. I honestly heard you. You've done some stuff, but this is what I have to do. So for me, and that's why I clarified the question about the 12 months. So if Nathan comes in this month, delegate and talk about the pumpkins, okay, and then comes in again next year, delegate about the pumpkin, but would we have done something different on that already and say every Halloween or every October 31st, we will have a pumpkin competition or whatever, right? We could do. So unless there is something that we could do, whatever the delegate is asking. We do. I think this horseshoe, these people, think of a way, and the staff, think of a way of how to accommodate or listen to what the delegate is saying on what we can do. But then if you have a delegate that's always saying the same thing, I think that's what we're trying to avoid here. For me, at least for me, if I put myself in that position, I keep coming back to you and you give me a thank you, goodbye, a little bit more nothing for me. All we're saying is, once the delegate comes to us, we will bet on it. We will make a suggestion and say, do you have any more content? Or if it's not, we've already looked at everything of what we can do to help you. So that, I think that's the reason for this, this section F. Actually don't want to see the 12-month there. You can just leave it open. If there's any content, you don't have to wait for 12 months. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Trustee Nathan Nguyen, do you want to, Trustee Nathan Nguyen, do you want to add a comment to that? Or do you want me to go on to somebody else on the same point? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do understand what you're saying, Trustee Del Rosario. What I said that I originally intended to not restrict the voice, right? I understand that we don't want anybody repeating the same thing, but I also believe that by constantly emphasizing the same issue, if no action is being made, I think it's really important for any of our delegates to be able to reappear, whether if it's 12 months or we can shorten that off to like maybe 4 to 6 to 8. Whether it's anything like that, I just want to give the delegate the opportunity to develop a sense of urgency for our board of trustees to look at an issue at hand and say, maybe it's time for us to reevaluate because no action steps are being taken in place for this issue. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor Pascucci, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm discussing, I'm thinking to myself which way to go on this one here especially, but I have a problem where somebody's in fact stopping me from listening or hearing things that other people want me to be shared to me as an elected official. That side of the thing. I also want to make sure that in fact, any documentation the individuals say that in fact they want to make a presentation, that in fact a statement is made in there, you are given one opportunity in the next 12 months or whatever period you guys decide if that's it. Third piece on this one, the time clock. If we're going to do this, then we should go from 5 to 7 to 8 to 10 minutes. I'm going to say 10, but the idea is then give them the opportunity. Don't shut them down and give them the opportunity, 1 or 2 more minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is, so that they have the option to go with that route if they wish. Giving them the opportunity. I'm trying to find this place of balance, like we all are at this table. And the fact of the matter is that we want to make sure we understand, but it goes back to what happened way back when we had a school presenting itself for 3, 4, 6, 5, 6 meetings, 5 times for every meeting. So anyway, so I just wanted to mention that those 2 items, and there are 3 items, and to give it consideration by staff.
Anybody else to this point? Seeing none, is there any other questions regarding this bylaw? Seeing none, all right, so that's, Madam Director, we doing,
Through the chair, if it is the will of the trustees, I would suggest removing F at this time for us to take back and work and think on some more, but that the rest of the amendments would be passed.
so would a new motion sound like this, and please correct me if it's incorrect, that the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees procedural bylaw be approved and enacted as amended with section F to be,
The exclusion of section F.
yeah, okay, that's perfect. Okay, so, all right, so let's see again. So the Board of Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees the procedural bylaw excluding section F be approved and enacted as amended. Have a mover, please. Trustee Daryl D'Souza, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. There are no notices of motions? Nope. Questions asked by trustees. Are there any questions? I'll start a list. Trustee Bruno Inica, anybody else? Seeing
Mr.
none, go ahead.
Chairman, can staff give me an update on the raffle issue that staff's been dealing with a considerable amount of time, as well as why we continue to go to the city of Mississauga, have a barrier and continue to go to the city of Mississauga? Let's just move on.
Through the chair, I'd be happy to respond to that. You make a really good point. Maybe it is time to move on. And I can do that. It may be that I end up needing to come back to the director to consult if I don't get anywhere from a procedural standpoint to see if maybe another avenue of persuasion might be required. But where I'm going, my angle was to try to see if there was any way to amend the current rules or to read in to the rules, to look at them more generally and see if there was any maneuvering we could do. And it doesn't seem at the city level that we are able to do that, or that there's not a willingness at this time to do that. So I will move on then to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario and speak to their general counsel and see if there's an appetite there. And if I don't get anywhere there, I will of course consult with the director and determine next steps as directed by her.
Mr. Chairman, if I could. Thank you very much, Margaret, Council Beck. I appreciate that. I sometimes wonder, and I'm not in the ins and outs of that conversation, but I'm sure that you said that this would assist. If somebody were to say to me, this is going to help schools subsidize a breakfast program, provide gifts at Christmas for kids, and enhance the education that kids are getting when parents are actually buying the product, I would jump at the chance. The fact that the city is being non-cooperative, use that word, non-cooperative, I think it is time to move on. I'm assuming that what I said, you've explained to them. This is not a multi-billion-dollar lottery raffle. This is parents getting goods, people buying tickets, number comes up, and you win the hockey tickets, the baseball tickets, opera tickets, whatever it may be. I don't get why they're so challenging with it, but from my perspective, I know that staff has worked extremely hard. You've worked extremely hard in trying to get them to listen, to change their mind. And if not, why not? What do I need to do, Dufferin Peel, to have you change your mind from that perspective so that it meets the rules and we move on? I don't get that. So if staff could let us know in issues and events, not, when there's an update, then it would be most appreciated.
And through the chair, may I respond to that? Thank you. I think you're raising some really good points, and it makes me think. I've been dealing with this at the legal counsel level, at the legal services level. And I think maybe discussions outside of that department would be helpful. And I'm going to pursue that because I've been dealing with it with my counterparts. But allow me, if you will, to explore different audiences at the city.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who has any questions? Seeing none, as there are no declared interest items, there is no in-camera session. Our next meeting is on June 4th, 2024. To everybody who is online, thank you very much for logging in and to listening to us this evening. We hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you. Can I have somebody move adjournment, please? Trustee Anisha Thomas, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. Good evening.